Okay, so welcome to our fourth MKBLP in conversation with a series of interviews. And today I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Neil Russell, Chairman of PJ Kerr. Thank you so much for joining me today, Neil. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Freddie. Thanks for asking me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's get straight to it. I mean, care homes across the country have suffered greatly as a result of the pandemic of COVID-19. How are you, and how's the staff at PJ Kerr doing?
Well, we've had a tough few months. There's no question about that. It's been very challenging for everybody. We've had a lot of staff have to go into isolation. Number of staff have become ill. And obviously our residents as well, sort of making sure that they remain safe, which has been the priority throughout. It's been challenging, but we're getting through it. I think that's the only thing you can say. Sort of by hook or by crook, we will see the other side of this, and very confident that we can get through without any more problems for our residents or our staff.
Of course. I mean, you reacted very quickly at the start of the pandemic. I mean,
Yeah.
before the lockdown was implemented, you restricted visitors. Can you tell us more about what prompted you to enforce these measures?
Well, we saw what was happening. Obviously, it was in China, it was in the news, and everyone's saying, "Oh, there's going to be an epidemic, there's going to be a pandemic." So I'm very fortunate. I'm surrounded by some very good people. We've got a great team in place at PJ Kerr, and between us, we were able to monitor what was going on across the world. And actually, yeah, this is going to happen. This is going to happen to us. What do we need to do? So we were prepared, or we were able to prepare very quickly. As soon as we saw the threat, we were able to take action. So we set up some protocols. We went to level 1 almost immediately, which saw the use of more PPE, preventing visitors, preventing movement sort of between the units, and then sort of up to level 2, which is where we're at and where we intend to remain until it's safe to do so, which just ensures the safety of everybody. And even with, we have had some COVID positive residents in our units across the company, and even with those residents there, our staff are safer at work than they are in, say, the supermarket.
Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary. How do you, I mean, I'm intrigued because obviously you are absolutely in the thick of this. So how do you galvanize your team? Can you tell us a little bit about the kind of a process and a protocol that happens at the very beginning,
We talk to them. So we've used video messages. Every member of staff has their own email account, which we put in place last year, so we were able to email everybody directly. We update everybody every day. We tell them what's happening around the company. So how many people how many residents are in isolation, how many residents have been tested, how many have tested positive, and touch wood, for over a month now we've had no positive test results, which is great news.
Wow. Yeah, that's
But by communicating with the staff and telling the staff what's happening, we've run staff surveys, so we've asked their feelings and then been able to respond to that. Identifying those who are scared, being able to deal with that. Our head of joy and well-being, Pam, who looks after the staff's joy and well-being, hence the job title, has been in touch with everybody who's been in isolation, whether it be sort of long-term isolation. We've had to furlough some staff because they've not been able to work. We've had temporary staff who've joined us to cover those who are in isolation, who've then gone into isolation themselves. So it's just lots and lots of communication. Our head office has been closed for nearly 3 months now, but all the management team are talking to each other 7 days a week. We have a 10 o'clock briefing. Everybody dials in, and we just talk about what's going on around the company, so everybody knows what's happening, and then we can share that, disseminate it sort of out through the team, and it's worked. We have some staff who are scared and are extremely worried, rightly so. but most understand the risks, and that's what we've tried to do is explain what the risk is to them, and ensure they understand it, and show them how to mitigate that risk, how to manage it, how to keep themselves as safe as they possibly can. We've been really fortunate with our procurement manager Daria, who's managed to keep us fully stocked in all the protective equipment we need. We got in early before some of our supplies were switched off. So in the early days, after lockdown, you couldn't buy masks because everything was being diverted to the NHS because everyone else had been forgotten about. But we were able to get in there early ahead of the game, and so we had a good stock and good supply of masks at the beginning, and then sort of finding workarounds for other bits of PPE that we couldn't get hold of, and we just managed to stay ahead of the game all the way through. We reckon we're probably about 2 weeks ahead of the government in our planning, which
Yes.
is not great from kind of the rest of the world's point of view, but it's good for us.
I think 2 weeks 2 weeks ahead would be much better for a lot of organizations out there right now.
Yeah.
I remember very early on also you went out and seek extra help. You went out and saying you needed support, and especially from Milton Keynes, the Milton population. How was the response to that?
It was huge response. So people who so our temporary staff who've come in, we've taken on sort of 70 or 80 staff across Milton Keynes and Peterborough, but and it's meant we have we had 20% of our staff, or over 20% of our staff, off sick at one point, but even with that, we've not been short-staffed.
I think that's brilliant. I think that just shows how much people wanted to help and get involved in there. Especially if you think about the NHS response as well in that context.
Yeah, the response has just been amazing. The people volunteering. We've had people pitching up, bringing boxes of chocolates, flowers, bags and bags of PPE that they've had in their cupboards and not using, sort of donations, and the response from the public has just been absolutely amazing. Obviously, I was on Look East a couple of times, which helped raise our profile a little bit.
Yes.
But it's it has been just incredible. The support we've had from the general public, the support we've had from our staff, everybody. They've really worked hard to ensure that our residents stay safe throughout all this.
So PG Care specialises very much in the care for adults of all ages with progressive or acquired neurological conditions. So whilst there has been significant report of death amongst the elderly cells who are caring for adults of all ages.
Well, as I said, for the last month, we've not had any positive tests. So our residents are vulnerable, some more so than some of the elderly. But because of the systems we've been able to put in place and maintain, and the hard work of the staff team, we've managed to keep them very safe. And we have had deaths across the company, which probably, as a result of COVID, it's difficult to tell because a lot of people weren't being tested in the early days, so we don't know the true cause. Most of our residents will die with us anyway. We do provide palliative care, and when they come to the end of their life, it happens, and unfortunately, it's an all too regular occurrence. But we've the care and the sort of everything we've been able to put in place, the isolation, putting our own lockdown in place, and the increased infection control protocols, so I think have ensured that we've managed to keep the coronavirus out of our homes. And like I say, fingers crossed at the moment, even with residents going in and out of hospital, we've managed not to bring it back into the home, which is great.
Good. So that actually brings me to to this question. You talked a lot about how you manage staff at your sites, which is great. Communications, obviously, visible leadership. Thank goodness for technology as well.
Absolutely.
As much as we moan about Zoom, and we all zoomed out at the end of each day. What would we have done had we not had this technology? Are you now able to receive sufficient COVID-19 testing?
It's hit and miss still. There's no
Okay.
question about it. Throughout the whole thing, it's been very hit and miss. We had, I think about 4 or 5 weeks ago, we had a dozen tests, and we only got results back on 4 of them. The rest they lost. Staff have been. We had a nurse who works in Milton Keynes was offered to go for a drive-through test in Belfast.
Wow.
Yeah. We had another member of staff phone up on a Friday, and she said, "Oh yeah, you can have a test in September." She phoned back went online. She went back on Saturday morning and got one at 8 o'clock. An hour later on Saturday. So it's very, very hit and miss. Some of the results come back in 24 hours. Some take 2 weeks. And actually, if it takes more than 24 hours, it's pointless, to be honest. There is just no point in doing the test. The benefit, we treat everybody as if they're positive, or negative, and negative at the same time. They talk about Schrodinger's virus. You have to pretend like you've got it so you don't give it to anybody, and pretend like you haven't got it so you don't catch it from anybody. But
actually, it's interesting. It is an interesting mindset, when you present it like that. And that must make everybody feel a little bit more cautious. Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, very good.
Yeah. Well, it works, and so we, if a resident shows symptoms, we isolate them. Member of staff shows symptoms, we isolate them. And the benefit of testing is to know that they haven't got it, so we can remove them from isolation. Because if they get ill, we're going to treat them, whatever they're ill with. So if they start having breathing difficulties, they're going to go into hospital and they'll be treated, irrespective of whether they've got the virus or not. So actually, a positive test doesn't really change a lot, but knowing somebody's negative means they can come out of isolation. So for a resident who doesn't understand why they're being shut in their bedroom, why they can't come out, why they can't engage with everybody, an awful lot of our residents just don't understand what's going on. So it's very, very difficult to isolate them. So if we can remove them from isolation, it's better for their health generally. If a member of staff has symptoms, getting a negative test from them means that we don't have to isolate them. They can come back to work much earlier, which takes the pressure off their colleagues and means that the residents can be better cared for. So,
In fact, you've just touched on a question I have for you, because you've very much taken a person-centered approach, taking in the specific individual needs and working with family to implement this. And you just mentioned that a lot of our residents don't really understand what's going on. So with a ban on visitation, how have you managed to keep up the interaction between residents and family members? That must have been pretty tough.
It has been. All of our family members have supported everything we've done, and we've got a family liaison team who are in touch with them on a regular basis, so they know what's happening. They know what's happening in the buildings. I've written to the families myself a couple of times just to give them an update. We use FaceTime, Skype, Zoom, Teams, whatever's available to ensure that they can see their loved ones in the units, and the units can talk back to each other. And they've been very supportive. It's actually the minority of residents that have, for our residents, the minority that have suffered from that. And we're now looking at ways of setting something up so they can see their loved ones. It's a lot harder for the families, I think, than for the residents who've not got the cognitive ability and don't really understand what's happening.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It was a funny feeling. I visited my in-laws, obviously physically distancing this weekend. We hadn't seen them since lockdown, and it was such a bitter thing, because it was as much it was wonderful to see them at a physical distancing, and just seeing them in their home and us outside sitting, and it was just the most. I didn't know whether I was happier of seeing them or sadder for having seen them, if that makes sense. It was just a very strange feeling.
the loss of physical contact is often harder than kind of being at a distance. You know, I used to be in the Foreign Office and I lived overseas for many years, so I didn't see my family for a very long time. But I was, you know, back in those days, you wrote letters and things. But it's the actual seeing them and not being able to give them a hug is actually a lot harder, I think, than being at a distance and not being able to see them at all.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. So I'm interested to understand how you've adopted some of the more physical element. I mean, you provide first-class specialist care for, you know, neurological patients, and, you know, you incorporate the multidiscipline approach, including therapies and activities, which I presume is extremely hands-on. So how have you adopted, you know, this approach to ensure the safety of care workers and patients?
It's about the right personal protective equipment. So you know, we followed the guidelines set out by the NHS, by the government, Public Health England, the World Health Organization, and we read all the guidelines. And they're changing all the time as people learn more about the disease. Back in March, nobody knew anything. It was a virus.
True.
Nobody knew how it worked. People still don't know everything. I mean, you know, we're reading things all the time. Smokers are less likely to get the virus. You know, a virus that causes breathing difficulties. That just doesn't make sense. Why is that? They're still trying to figure things like that out. Why does it affect um, minorities more than it affects others? Trying to understand that. So we've been staying on top of this guidance and implementing what we can as we learn more. We've used very strong sort of PPE rules. So, you know, people aren't, as soon as somebody comes into the building, they wash their hands. We've bought mobile sinks that go by the front doors. They come in, they get changed into surgical scrubs that we put through a hospital wash in the on site, so the, you know, the clothes they're putting on are clean. They haven't been outside of the building. Then they wear masks, they wear gloves, and they're changing those regularly through the day. So, you know, the masks only last 4 hours, so every 4 hours they're changing their masks. We take everybody's temperature every 2 hours. When they arrive, if somebody starts to spike a temperature, they get sent home, you know, as soon as, and taking those immediate precautions rather than, oh, we'll wait and see, I think keeps people as safe as possible. We couldn't get hold of long sleeve gowns, for example, was one issue. But what we found was some disposable raincoats. You know, and so when people are working closely with residents, they put these raincoats on. They wear it with the resident, they take it off, they throw it away. You know, it's not cheap, let's be honest, and we're probably spending, you know, hundreds of thousands of pounds extra on all of this equipment, but that's irrelevant when it comes to protecting people and saving lives.
Yeah, I mean, what's extraordinary when listening to your story, Neil, is that, you know, right now a lot of us are trying to interpret, you know, the government's advice, and we're all making our own stories about what we should and shouldn't do. You know, you just look at all the protests that are happening, you know, the weekend. But in your sector, there's no room for grey, is it? It's actually, it's got to be belt and braces at all time, which must be putting a significant pressure on you know being on it, you know, which actually brings me to this question. I mean, in your opinion, has the support provision throughout the pandemic from public health and England and the government for care homes like PJ Care been enough?
No, it's simple. For care homes, we, like I said right earlier on, I've got a great team working with me, people who understand lots of different areas, and, you know, the way we've worked over the last 3 months has just been incredible. And, you know, and every single member of that team has performed really well. So we understand what's going on, and people can go off and they can take their time to understand the guidance and see what's happening. There's a lot of care homes that just don't have that the ability to do that, which is obviously that they're having to try and guess at the guidelines, a bit like everybody else. And the information that's come out from the government has been contradictory right from day one. I mean, forget about all the stuff that's happened over the last couple of weeks. From day one, it's changed on a regular basis, and it has been very difficult for people to understand what they should and shouldn't do, and what they can do and what they can't do. And I think that's part of the biggest issue in terms of the support for care homes. I mean, people talk about they need finance for this and that, and that's a completely different story. You know, but it's actually the enabling people to understand what they should be doing, and that there's been very little in that. And a lot of homes, you know, you'll have a manager running that home who's running it on their own solo. Even homes that are part of a bigger organisation, you know, they're not always getting the support from above that that they need. So better guidance and support from the Public Health England, the CQC. You know, everything they've tried to get involved with over those 3 months has just fallen flat on its face. You know, they because we're having difficulty getting testing, they decided to send us some test kits, and they lost every single one we did. You know, completely pointless. They're doing these mini inspections. They're phoning up and asking a load of questions. You know, which is it's just a bit of extra work. It's actually not helping us out in any way. Yeah, the support has been. There's just nothing.
No, nothing. I mean, it's interesting because you did mention at the beginning of our chat that you talked about the speed of change, and actually, in a lot of work that we are doing right now, it's about helping leaders to understand where they are in that change process, because the speed of change has been so exponential that actually our ability to know what was going on has been so far behind. So I'm not here to defend the government, but I think probably like a lot of us, we just didn't know how to deal with this, which hopefully now we're catching up with some of that, and you should see it a little bit better. The other thing I'd say to some of your comments is I think because you've got such a great culture, that's probably enabled you to be able to achieve some of the things that you have achieved.
Yeah.
One of the things that people are, of course, are now talking about is the, post-COVID-19, whatever that looks like, is, many people are recognizing that actually the next pandemic is likely to be around mental health. And so can you tell us, what are you doing to support your teams right now to deal with that as we continue to move forward, dealing with the pandemic and, learning how to cope with it. I don't think there's going to be a day where, everybody's going to say, it's okay, you can go out and play again. And I guess my second question would be, what advice do you have for leaders and businesses on what they should do and what they should think about right now to try and minimize disruptions long term?
Yeah, well, the mental health pandemic has probably been around for a very, very long time. I think it's probably fair to say, but yeah, as people come out of isolation, it's going to be a lot harder. And we're starting to talk to staff now who've been, with underlying conditions, and they're saying, or some are saying, yeah, no, I want to come back to work. I want to come back to work. Others are, they're scared, and it is affecting their mental health. And the staff surveys we run, we it's a question we put in there: is your mental health or do you need support with your mental health at this time? Staff, and it's a yes or no question. Staff say yes, we ask them to give their name, and we get in touch with them. We've got counselling services available that we provide through a personal group, and that everyone can just dial up, completely anonymous. So staff have sort of external support that's available, and we know nothing about it, so they don't have to talk to us about it if they don't want to. But we give the staff support. We give the staff the opportunity to talk about their mental health, and I think that's the key thing is talking about it. It is something. It is something that's got a bit of a stigma about it, and we brush it under the carpet. You'll be all right. You'll be all right. Man up. Get on with it. Whatever expression. And people will try and do that, and it'll just make them worse. And then something goes wrong. And quite often it happens to mental health problems they don't pick and choose who they're going to hit. So whatever kind of problem you have, it can just come out of it nowhere, and the strongest people can suffer from any kind of mental health problem. And you think, and it's like, oh, I never suspected. You never suspected. You will never suspect because you don't ask.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's that constant question. We're going back to the staff on a regular basis. How are you feeling? Are you okay? Like I said, we've appointed or last year she's been in place for a year. Pam, our head of joy and wellbeing, and that's part of her job is to monitor the staff's wellbeing. We got rid of the HR department. We got rid of HR and replaced them with joy and wellbeing. Let's focus on the positive. What can we do to what can we do to help you? HR's process, so it's keeping records and going through the process for whatever kind of employee relations are going on, sort of the formal side of things, and that's easy, and we can outsource that. And we do work very closely with Housepers for sort of outsourcing that side of it. So we got rid of them, spent the money instead on looking after people's well-being and making sure that the happier staff are, the better they'll perform, the more you get out of them. The better it is for everybody. It's a win-win situation. There's no question about it. Making your staff feel happy is good for everybody. If we've got staff who could, we work in the care industry. It's massively underpaid. I wish I could pay my staff 2-3 times what I pay them. Unfortunately, the NHS won't pay me enough to enable me to do that. Obviously, because you've got to run a business. But people who choose to work in this industry because of the joy they get out of doing the job they do. But there's huge pressures. As I said, a lot of our residents come in palliative care. They're very poorly. They're very sick. That puts pressure on everybody. So we have to, and I think sort of going forward, everybody needs to look at that. Are you okay? And that constant question. And eventually somebody will say, well, actually, no, I'm not. And then you can do something about it.
Being able to be able to listen. It's funny. We had a discussion this morning, and I think what I hear also for other businesses, what you're saying really is it HR? Do you actually need HR right now, or actually do you need to think about the culture of the organization and building a culture where people feel trusted, that they can speak at will and share how they are feeling? We had a meeting this morning with some of our teams, and it's so easy right now to listen to the fears of the voice of fears and cynicism and judgment, where actually we should be listening to the voice of hope, curiosity, and being compassionate, which is so much better. So I love your optimism on that. I've got one final question for you, Neil, which is so finally, what message of hope do you have for business leaders and businesses in MK?
Well, I think one of the things we're doing, and one of the things we're looking at, every cloud has a silver lining. What we're going through at the moment is going to come to an end. There may be a second spike. It may be worse than the first spike. We don't know. We got through the first one. We're here. We're surviving. We will get through the second one if it comes. And if COVID comes back, it's going to get easier as we go along. But when we get to the end of it, and we return to normal, because everything has changed so much, we get to say what normal is.
Yep.
And we've at work, at PJ Care, we've stopped calling it returning to normal. We're calling it a reset. And when we reset, we are shaping how we want our business to look going forwards. So it's a real opportunity. Building from almost from the ground up. What do we want our company to look like going forwards? Because actually, how it used to be doesn't really matter anymore, because everything has changed. There's a massive opportunity for people to sort of to look at these things, and it goes across everything we're doing. So personal lives as well. We've hardly been out for 12 weeks. No one's been away on holiday. Actually, what do we need to do? Do we need to do these things? There's things we've missed and things we want to get back to, but the things we used to do on a regular basis, because we used to do them on a regular basis, we've binned all that now, and now we can do what we want and what we need to, rather than what we do because it's what we do. So, you know, it's real opportunity at the end of all this to make things better going forwards.
Yeah, completely agree with you. Completely. I mean, you know, looking at your purpose and repurposing is a good thing, or resetting, as you said it. Neil, it's been an absolute pleasure. Good to see you again, and you know, thank you for you know, opening up to us today and sharing your thoughts with our members. And we wish you, you know, all the very best moving forward. Looks like you got things pretty well in hand, and hopefully we will see you again in the near future. So all the best.
Fingers crossed. We'll yeah. Thank you very much, Freddie. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.